I'm a 21-year-old guy. And I was sent to boarding school when I was 9. My parents said it was to give me the best education money could buy. That's how they explained it to everyone. And that's how they explained it to me, too. The truth, which I only found out much later, was that they just didn't want to deal with raising a kid. They told some relatives in passing that it was time for a break, but no one thought it was serious enough to challenge. No one told me anything. I remember the day they dropped me off. It was early September. My dad parked the car. My mom signed a few forms, and within minutes, they were back in the car and gone. I didn't even get a tour of the place with them. I spent that first night in a room with another boy, who'd already been there a year. He didn't talk much. I cried under the blanket until I fell asleep. I kept staring at the school phone by the hallway door, hoping they'd call. They didn't, for the first year. They called maybe once every few weeks, sometimes just for a couple of minutes, and sometimes they didn't call for over a month. I used to wait near the phone room after dinner in case they tried. The staff told me not to get my hopes up too often. I stopped waiting after a while. The school itself was top tier. I'll give them that. Great facilities, well-funded programs, teachers who cared. But it didn't take long to realize that for most of the other students, this was just a temporary thing. During Christmas or Easter, their families would pick them up. Summer came, and the dorms would empty out. I stayed behind. By the time I was 11, I already knew the drill. Holidays meant a nearly empty campus. A few of us stayed, kids from overseas or kids like me who didn't have anyone coming. The dorm supervisors would sometimes organize movies or board games, but it never felt like enough. You could hear how quiet the halls got when no one was around. When I turned 13, one of my teachers slipped up. We were talking about cities, and she asked if I'd ever visited the city my parents had moved to. I had no idea what she was talking about. I thought we still lived in the same town. She froze, realizing what she'd said, and tried to brush past it. I went to the admin office to call the only number I had on file. It was disconnected. I sent 3 emails over the next week. No one responded. At 15, I gave up trying. I stopped waiting on visiting days. The school staff noticed, and a few of them stepped in quietly. One of the sports coaches helped me set up a part-time job in the library. Another teacher made me a birthday cake that year. They never said anything directly, but I think they understood. They tried in their own way. Summer breaks became a time to work and stay busy. I signed up for enrichment programs, took extra courses, and did research projects. It was easier than going home because home didn't exist anymore. When people asked where I'd be during break, I just said I was staying for an academic project. By senior year, I had become one of the top students in my class. I got selected as captain of the track team. My college applications were strong. The staff helped me fine-tune them. When the invitations for graduation were printed, I sent one to the address. I had no reply. Graduation day came. Everyone was hugging their families, taking photos, loading cars. I stood at the gate with my suitcase, waiting. I stayed out there for nearly 4 hours. People stopped asking if someone was coming. Eventually, the headmaster walked out, gave me a look I'll never forget, and offered to drive me to the train station. We didn't say much during the ride. He handed me a water bottle and paid for the ticket himself. What my parents didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had already planned my escape. During senior year, I'd taken 3 part-time jobs and saved every penny. I found a cheap apartment near my college campus and signed the lease on my own. I never told the school staff. I didn't want to be talked out of it. When I stepped off that train, I didn't go looking for anyone. I went straight to the apartment. The keys were waiting in a lockbox. I unpacked my bags, set up the mattress on the floor, and sat there in silence. That was the first night I realized I wasn't a student anymore. I wasn't anyone's son, either. Not really. I was just a guy in a bare room, starting from zero. But at least this time, no one was going to disappear on me. The first semester of college was rough but manageable. I kept to myself, worked long shifts in the dining hall, and took early morning classes to free up time for side jobs. After the move from boarding school, I didn't bring much with me: a suitcase, some clothes, old notebooks. I used to fold up the mattress in a second-hand desk from a buy and sell board. My meals were mostly peanut butter sandwiches and rice with canned vegetables. I didn't expect anything better. One night after a lecture, I sat down and wrote a letter. I printed out a few of my graduation photos and tucked them in the envelope. I didn't write much, just that I had graduated, moved to college, and wanted some kind of closure, any explanation. I mailed it to the only address I'd ever known. 3 weeks later, the envelope came back, stamp torn off, no forwarding address. I took that letter to the college counselor's office. The woman at the front desk looked confused until I explained my situation: no contact with family, no one to list for emergencies, no support. The counselor sat with me for nearly an hour, asking questions gently. Then she explained how I could apply for legal emancipation and something called independent student status so I wouldn't lose my financial aid. While the paperwork started, I picked up more shifts: campus bookstore on weekends, delivery app in the evenings. I sold some of my old school gear, freshman textbooks, a barely used calculator, even a suit I'd outgrown. That got me through the next 2 months. I used coupons, skipped meals, and kept everything written down in a notebook: rent bills, textbooks. I learned fast. Over winter break, the dorms emptied out again, just like school. One of the guys from my economics class noticed I was still on campus and asked why I hadn't gone home. I just said my family lived too far. He shrugged and invited me to stay with his family for the week. I almost didn't go, but I figured one hot shower and a meal couldn't hurt. That was the first time I saw what a normal house looked like during the holidays. His family had photos everywhere, home-cooked meals, inside jokes. His younger brother dragged me into a video game tournament. His mother handed me a blanket and told me to grab snacks from the fridge whenever I wanted. I stayed 5 days. She texted me later that month, before finals, to ask how I was sleeping and if I needed anything. That was the week I decided to search, not out of nostalgia, more like curiosity. I opened a free trial on one of those property lookup websites and typed in my parents' full names. The results hit fast. They bought a new house in another state 4 years ago. The house was in both their names. I found a school newsletter with my mother listed as a volunteer. Then came a blog from a local park event where they had been photographed alongside a girl who looked about 7-8 daughter, someone I'd never heard about. I created a blank social media account and searched their names. Within minutes, I found the profiles, family photos, vacation albums, birthday cakes. One post had all of them at a beach resort, matching outfits, all smiles. The caption said, "Our world." I stared at that post for 10 minutes. I didn't comment, I didn't message them. But I found a distant relative's profile, someone I vaguely remembered from early childhood. I sent a message, just asking why no one had reached out. The reply came a day later. It was cold, said I had always been difficult, never grateful, said my parents had done their best, and that I should get over the past. That was the last message I got. They blocked the account. After that, I deleted it and never tried again. After that, I buried myself in work. I doubled my course load and applied for internships like my life depended on it. I got accepted into a competitive program for students in public policy and started working part-time for a local nonprofit. One of the staff members there introduced me to journaling, not the diary kind, but structured entries with facts, timelines, and personal documentation. I started writing it all down, not to dwell, just to make sense of what had happened. I recorded everything I remembered, names, dates, conversations, places. I wanted it on paper, something real. I kept the returned envelope, the graduation photos, in a file with my journal. At some point that spring, I sat down with the counselor again. We updated my records for emergency contact. I listed the friend's mother. She didn't know I had done that, but I couldn't think of anyone else who would actually answer the phone. And if something happened to me, I didn't tell her, and I didn't tell him, but from that point forward, I made a decision. I wasn't going to write letters again. I wasn't going to send emails or check their profiles. I had already spent too many years standing in doorways, waiting for someone who wasn't coming. The story from here on out was mine and mine alone. It happened during a quiet week between midterms. I was checking my university email like I usually did before class when I saw a message with a name I hadn't read in years. It was from my father. The subject line was simple. Hoping to talk. The body was short, 2 maybe 4 lines. He asked if I had time for a conversation and said they wanted to reconnect. I stared at the screen for a long time before doing anything. The address was real. It wasn't spoofed or fake. It matched the old one I remembered, though the domain was new. I didn't reply. I forwarded the message to my college counselor and flagged it for later. I took a screenshot and sent it to the friend whose family had taken me in over winter break. We sat down and talked it through. No one gave me answers. They just asked what I needed and what I was willing to risk. After a week, I responded with one line. Why now? After all this time, after all the silence? The next reply came quickly. He said that their daughter, my half-sister, had seen my name in a student spotlight article. Apparently, my photo and a small write-up had been featured on the university's website for a scholarship I'd received. She had asked questions, and that's what had prompted the email. He said they wanted to be better, to make amends. Nowhere in the message did he mention the past. No mention of boarding school, no mention of missed holidays, no explanation for why no one showed up at graduation. Just a line about moving forward. I answered again. I asked directly, why had they left me at that school for so long? Why had they moved to another state without telling me? Why didn't anyone come? His next message ignored all of it. He wrote that we should stop looking backward and instead build something new. No details, no honesty. Just vague talk about reconnecting and letting go of bitterness. That's when I replied with conditions. I said all communication had to stay in writing. No calls, no surprise visits, no contact through third parties. I made it clear I was legally emancipated with full financial independence. I told him I'd already designated my emergency contact years ago, my friend's mother, who had shown up when they didn't. 3 days later, a message popped up from a new number. I didn't open it. I checked the sender's name, saw his initials, and blocked it immediately. I also set a filter on my phone to delete messages from any unapproved numbers. 2 days after that, I got an email from my mother. Her tone was completely different. She blamed him for everything. She said she was powerless at the time, that she'd wanted to reach out but was afraid. She mentioned that she had kept some of my school photos and claimed she thought I was happy at the academy. She said she hoped we could talk sometime. I replied once. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. I just said that I was safe, healthy, and building my life without them. I told her I didn't want a relationship. That they had made their choice, and that I had made mine. I ended the message with one line, please don't contact me again. Then I blocked both of the emails, phone numbers, any social media handles I could connect to their names. I double-checked every platform. I had removed any public-facing details and updated my privacy settings. I created a new digital identity for anything sensitive: banking, legal documents, mailing addresses. When I saw my therapist that week, I brought the whole printout. We went through every message, every response, every word. She didn't tell me I had done the right thing. She didn't tell me I was wrong, either. She just helped me understand what it meant to choose a boundary and keep it. That night, I opened my journal and flipped back through the entries from freshman year. Notes about the returned letter, the family photos I wasn't in, the job applications, the nights I'd stayed in the library until closing. I added a new page. I wrote out every interaction I just had with them, not emotionally, just facts. What was said, what I replied, what I did. And then I started a new file on my laptop, draft 1. It wasn't a memoir, not yet. More like a personal essay series. I didn't start with the bad memories. I started with the train ride after graduation, the empty seat next to me, the silence. Then I wrote about the apartment, the meals I made, the part-time job at the bookstore. I laid it out one page at a time. This wasn't revenge. I wasn't planning to send it to anyone. It was just time to put it all somewhere solid. Not for them, for me. Because if they were finally trying to rewrite the story, then I needed to make sure my mind stayed true, and the return address, and came with a sealed envelope inside. When I opened it, I had to read it twice to understand. My name had been listed as the emergency guardian for a minor me half-sister. My parents were apparently planning to leave the country. According to the attached document, they had submitted forms naming me as the legal fallback in case of emergency. No heads up, no permission. Just my name printed like I'd volunteered. I called the attorney listed in the notice. After confirming my identity, they sounded confused. They told me they'd been assured this was a family arrangement. I explained I was estranged and hadn't spoken to either parent in years. The line went quiet. Then they said they'd send me the necessary forms to contest the filing and apologize for the mistake. I used the savings from my internship to retain a lawyer. The next day, we prepared a statement rejecting guardianship and included records showing my legal emancipation. I gave her a folder with my college registration, my financial aid records, and the journal entry documenting the returned letter. She said it would help build a timeline while pulling financial documents together. She ran a credit history search on me and found something worse. I was still listed on 2 unpaid medical debts from childhood hospital visits from over a decade ago. The charges had been aging in collections and were dragging my file down. One was from an urgent care visit when I was 11. The other was a pediatric hospital stay the same year. My parents had never removed my name, and the billing system hadn't flagged me as a minor. When the debts transferred to a collection agency, we contacted the hospital and submitted my emancipation order, along with a sworn statement about the family estrangement. My lawyer sent a demand letter requesting full removal of my liability. It took weeks of back and forth, but the hospital finally agreed to clear the record once they verified I had never been responsible for payment. I made copies of every email and filed them in a binder. Then things got worse. My university's financial aid office requested a meeting. They'd received an anonymous report claiming I had undeclared support from family and wasn't eligible for certain grants. I had to produce every document again: legal status, tax records, bank statements. My lawyer stepped in and submitted formal affidavits and court papers verifying my independence. After a full review, the aid office ruled in my favor. But the timing was too suspicious to ignore. I asked my lawyer to trace the source of the tip-off. She said we might not get a name, but if it came from a registered user or IP with a pattern, it could be subpoenaed in future legal matters. I gave her permission to proceed if needed. I wasn't going to let anyone undermine what I had worked for. After that, I went through every university record and requested a full update. I removed any remaining family fields, deleted their names from old forms, and added only verified chosen contacts. The friend's mother, who had welcomed me over winter break, agreed to sign a notarized statement describing her role as my emergency contact and her history of support. We filed that with the school as well. One of my professors invited me to speak on a college panel about resilience and navigating independence. I agreed, but only under my first name. The panel was open to students and staff, and the turnout was larger than expected. I talked about systems show they break, who gets lost, and what happens when no one notices. Afterward, a professor from the writing department came up and told me I had the bones of something bigger. Not a story for pity, but a case study on how easy it is for someone to fall through every crack if no one asks the right questions. That night, I started outlining chapters. I didn't start with the emotional parts. I started with paperwork, the lost medical records, the school documents, the fake guardian filing. I wanted facts that couldn't be twisted. As a final step, my lawyer filed paperwork to block my parents from ever using my name and legal documentation again. That meant no future filings, no guardianship claims, no estate planning where I'd be named without consent. If they tried, it would be considered fraud. We also added a statement to the court file that I had no contact and no obligations to any members of my biological family present or future. It wasn't a dramatic moment. There was no closure email or final call. Just a stack of signed documents, a closed folder, and a quiet night in my apartment. The version of me they once abandoned didn't exist in their paperwork anymore. And now, legally, I didn't exist in theirs either. It had been a few months since I'd legally shut every door linking me to my parents when I got another call. This time, from Child Protective Services. They were trying to confirm if I was available to assume temporary guardianship for my half-sister. I didn't know what had happened until they explained that both my parents had been detained overseas in connection with financial fraud. Their daughter had been taken into custody by authorities and was now in the system. No other family members were stepping forward. I told the agent immediately that I had no relationship with her and was not a viable placement. I clarified that I had been legally emancipated for years and had been explicitly removed from any guardianship obligations. She said she understood and would pursue alternate options.